Hey everybody, this is John for MTG Nexus coming at you with the top 5 modern deck lists here in May of 2023. As a friendly reminder, if you do like informative modern content, please consider subscribing to the channel, and let's get into it. So first up, obviously Murktide's been kind of dethroned, or 1A, 1B for a couple months now, kind of being dethroned by Creativity that you see before us. Now Creativity really comes in two flavors, 5-color and Jund. This one's the 5-color variant. The notable thing with this is you get to play all the powerful stuff. You get to play Run in 6, you get to play Teferi Time Raveler, you get to play Leyline Binding, Prismatic Ending, while still having Creativity and Archons. The one downside of this one is you are a 5-color base red deck playing, basically playing 5 colors. Take a lot of damage from your mana base. You're very vulnerable to things like Blood Moon. So price of power is great in this deck, but still one of the more powerful, consistent decks in the format. As far as the sideboard, you're very much set up against mirror matches and other Cascade decks with Hallowed Moonlight helping to shut down things like Rhinos and Living End, as well as the Mirror, Flusterstorms, and Veil of Summers, because blue is probably the most dominant color in the format right now. Teferi Time Raveler, a lot of the same things, shuts down a lot of those Cascade decks and such. Prismari Command, just a nice utility card, and then Wear Tear and Boseiju, because one of your biggest threats is the card Blood Moon, and 2 of the top decks in the format besides this happen to play Blood Moon either in the main deck or the sideboard. We'll talk about the other variant of Creativity next. The other variant of Creativity, which I would say is definitely a smaller variant than the 5-color version, is the Jund variant. Now the Jund variant is a little bit more of a mixed deck. Not only is the mana base a little bit cleaner, so you can afford to play things like Boseiju in the main deck without having as many problems. This is also kind of a hybrid Reanimator Creativity deck. Now in 5-color you certainly can play a copy or 2 of Persist, but you're certainly stretching the mana base and you never quite know which cards you're going to draw. Whereas this one, you're more focused on the Reanimator plan with cards like Bitter Reunion, Fable the Mirror Breaker, the new Invasion of Urgamon to put it in the graveyard, and then Renin Realm Breaker is an interesting one. Allows you to mill, also makes your land into a 3/3 until end of turn. With the Vigilance, Hexproof, and Haste until end of turn, still all land. Actually, I guess it becomes that permanently. But you get to mill, potentially put a Archon in the graveyard that bring it back with Persist. You have a little bit of disruption, so you're kind of like this hybrid Jund mid-range deck and Creativity combo, as well as having a Reanimator plan. So the parts kind of fit all nicely together. You have Bolt and Fatal Push or deal with early creatures, Inquisition, or you can easily slot in Thoughtseize here if you wanted to hit a little bit more relevant cards sometimes. And then you still get to play the powerful card Fable the Mirror Breaker that you get to play in 5-color, but having a little bit better of a mana base and probably being more realistically a little bit better against Blood Moon, although your Dweller Mines still do get shit off by that. Sideboard options obviously a little bit different, but still get to face a lot of the same things. Necromantia to deal with any type of combo decks, the mirror matches, Cascade decks, etc. Brotherhood's End, very good against Hammer Time, any type of creature-based decks that might be floating around. Veil of Summer to fight through counter spells. Nature's Claim helps to deal with Blood Moon. Turn the Earth, decent against graveyard nonsense. Also a little bit of life gain against something like Burn. Hitsugu, very good against Hammer Time specifically. Second copy of Boseiju, and then obviously an Emrakul for the mill matchup, or you can just bring it in when you think your opponent might be extracting your Archons, just as an alternative win con. Now, obviously, the dethroned former queen of the format for a good part of 2022 and some of 2023 so far, and that is Murktide. This is still probably the best tempo deck in the format, although Rhino certainly gives it a run for its money. You get to play annoying cards like Ragavan, DRC, and then you also have Ledger Shredder and Murktide Regent, the namesake card. Sometimes Murktide ebbs and flows in the deck. Sometimes you see 3 or 4, sometimes you see 2, but still, namesake card of the deck. The rest of the deck's pretty simplistic what you're trying to do. You're very much trying to cast a bunch of cheap spells, interact with your opponent, and just get them dead. You are very much like Legacy Blue-Red Delver in that regard. You can play a longer game, especially when you have cards like Archmage's Charm in your particular build, but you're much more built to take advantage of the early turns against the clunkier combo decks, and you generally want to be the control deck against aggro decks like Burn and Hammer Time, etc. Sideboard is a myriad of different things, especially since you see so many cards with Iteration and Consider and Meshra's Bauble. Fluster Storms for Counterspell War, Dress Down for Elementals and Urza's Saga tokens, Mystical Dispute for Counterspell War, Subtlety. This comes in a number of situations, helps to fight over annoying things like Planeswalkers or other creatures. Fury, whenever you find yourself in a creature-based matchup, or can come in against grindier matchups when you need more threats. Seasoned Pyro, once again, kind of a grindy card. Blood Moon, this comes in against a lot of different decks, creativity notably among them. Braid, just as kind of a split removal card, deals with Hammer Time shenanigans while also being a removal spell for creatures. Engineer Explosives, very good against a lot of different things. Kind of a nice catch-all against anything like Rhino tokens, Urza Saga tokens, etc. Tormod's Crypt, when you need a little bit of graveyard hate, whether it's against Living End or potentially, you could bring in the mirror match, but I think this is more for Living End, Dredge, that kind of nonsense. Number 3 deck in the format, Rhinos. Now, Rhinos, the builds vary a little bit, but right now the main ones are Mystical Disputes in the main deck, along to pair with your Force of Negations, simply because there are so many blue decks in the format. You're not seeing as many cards like Bone Crusher Giant. Instead, you're seeing some number of Brazen Borrowers, some number of Murktide Regents, and then, you know, the 7 or 8 copies of Dead Gone Fire Ice, just to deal with your opponent's early creature rush. Some number of Furies to deal with opposing creature decks, whether it be, you know, Yawgmoth, Burn, etc. You know, very much trying to do the thing. You try to cascade with either Violent Outburst or Shardless Agent into your copy of Crashing Footballs. Obviously, there is the 4-color variant that also runs Ardent Plea. The upside of that one is you get to play more Cascaders. The downside, your mana base is a little bit clunkier, and you're a little bit more vulnerable to Blood Moon, as opposed to being able to play Blood Moon quite easily. In this Teamer version, Blood Moon obviously very good against a lot of the matchups that you struggle with, things like Creativity, etc. Additional copies of Fury for the creature-based decks. Endurance, it serves a couple different purposes. This kind of serves as a backup tempo plan against decks like Blue-White Control, other Elementals decks, etc. Allows you to pair it with your counter spells, and, you know, if you're going to be fighting through things like Chalice of the Voids, Void Mirrors, that kind of stuff, helps you out in that regard. Force of Vigor, primarily here to fight through set hate cards. You know, they're not necessarily in an all-time high right now, but there are still decks that run Chalice, there are still decks that run Void Mirror. You know, another card that you have to fight through is Teferi Time Raveler, but that requires different skills, or a different set of cards than cards like Void Mirror and Chalice of the Void. Anuaru as an additional bounce spell, in addition to the ones in your main deck. Then Gemstone Caverns plays a very important role, especially when you're on the draw, to be able to get ahead a little bit on mana. And, you know, cascading on 2 versus turn 3 can be very important in matchups where racing happens, like Murktide and Burn. Deck number 4, a deck we played last week on stream, that is Hammer Time. Now, there's a couple different variants of this. There's the mono white version that you see before you, and then there's the blue-white version. The main difference is Spell Pierced and a little bit of the flexibility slots, things like Reality Chip. The rest of the deck is fairly simplistic. You get Pure Steel Paladin or Sigarda's Aid, and then you try to equip a Colossus Hammer on things and beat down. Beyond that, you're playing a bunch of cheap artifacts, things like Ornithopter and Memnite, to be able to take advantage of things like Springleaf Drum or Paradise Mantle. And then you're using things like Esper Sentinel, Giver of Runes in the early turns, Stoneforge Mystic to be able to fetch up Caldera Complete or just Hammers or Shadow Spears, and then obviously the Urza Saga backup plan, making big constructs and beating your opponent down also quite nice if your opponent is able to deal with your equipment strategy, or if it's just not coming together. Sideboard, or one of the newer things to the thing, is Surge of Salvation. Now this is kind of fighting over the same slot as Blacksmith Skill. They do similar but different things. This one gives you and permanent control hexproof, so this can blank an Archon trigger. This can prevent Fury from being irrelevant, etc. The downside is it does not give indestructibility, so something like a Supreme Verdict or something still is annoying. But it can also blank a Thoughtseize, so that's quite nice. So I don't think people have quite settled on what's the good split on Surge of Salvation, Blacksmith Skill, Spell Pierce, those kind of being the all fighting over the 1 mana protection slot. The rest of the sideboard, March of Otherworldly Light just deals with a whole bunch of different things, whether it be creatures, artifacts, enchantments. There's any number of things that you want to fight through. Chalice of the Void can be relevant in some situations. Certain creatures of your opponent, especially turn 1 Ragavan, those kind of things. Sanctifier and Vec, any type of red base decks, very good specifically against Rakdos. Rakdos. Rakdos Scam, I almost said Rakdos midrange. Draenith, Magistrate, your opponent can't cast spells from anywhere other than their hands. Basically your anti-cascade tech. Orvar, this is for creativity. Sword of Fire and Ice whenever you're playing against red-based decks, and then Pithing Needle just as a nice bullet for your Urza's Sagas. Finally, the aforementioned Rakdos Scam. Now this is your kind of traditional rock-based mid-range deck with a twist. One of the things the current rock-based decks, Jund Saga, traditional Jund mid-range, regular Rakdos mid-range, all kind of struggle with is they're not even the best mid-range deck in the format anymore. That kind of goes to either Elementals or something like Creativity or the Cascade decks, especially Rhinos. Instead, what this deck tries to take advantage of is, in addition to being a rock-style deck, you get to play Grief and Fury. You can evoke, pitch cost them, and then you can use either Undying Malice or Feign Death to bring them back. This can often mean on turn 1 that you're either double thought seizing your opponent and getting a 4-3 behind, or you're just leaving a 4-4 double striker that can close out the game very, very quickly. Beyond that, you get to play powerful things like Ragavan. A lot of these versions also play Blood Moon in the main deck. So you have a lot of powerful turn 1 plays, the Scam package, Thoughtseize, Ragavan, and you just kind of try to take over the game and win quickly before your opponent can recover. Alternatively, you can kind of play this traditional rock mid-range game plan with things like Seasoned Pyromancer and Fable, hoping the wrong half problem, and then eventually hard casting your Griefs and Furies getting ahead. The struggle this deck has, primarily against decks that go over the top of it, decks like 4-color Omnath, etc., or decks that don't care about what it's doing. Sometimes Boros Burn can be a difficult matchup simply because if you don't have your very fast start of Grief and Fury, sometimes Burn can just kill you before you can get your real game plan rolling. But overall, this is probably the 5th best deck in the format. If I were to go with the 6th best deck, it would probably be Living End right now. But Modern hasn't really been shaken up a whole lot. Now, obviously, the Lord of the Rings set coming out might shake things up a little bit. But for now, the format's kind of pretty set, and it's a lot of just like innovating on what already exists. Some previous archetypes are coming back in small doses. You're seeing things like Slivers pop up on occasion. Things like Bant Nightfall, Opes All Spells. So a lot of decks that have, in the past popped up every once in a while are popping up now and again. I think that's really nice for the Modern format. It's nice that people are innovating with some of the new cards in those archetypes, but none of them have really made enough of a dent in the format right now to make a difference in the top end of the format. But if you like this kind of Modern content, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and hope to see you for our next Modern video.